into the Full Tilt Devy podcast on the Full Tilt Podcast Network. And now for your hosts, Mr. John Arrington and Andy Starr.
What's up, guys? I'm your host, Dynasty Coach A, joined as always by Andy at AStarFF on Twitter. And we're back. We skipped a couple weeks. We had some, or actually, I guess we skipped a week. Had Thanksgiving break. Hopefully everyone had a great time with their families and friends and didn't get into too many fights and everything, and got to watch a lot of good football, whether it was NFL, college, and everything in between. But today we have a lot of news. We have a lot of transfer stuff going on, but we're not going to get into that one just yet because I feel like we have a lot of players that are still going to be jumping into all that. But we have like a coaching carousel going on right now, some major changes. Obviously, it's that time of year. So why don't we dive into that? But first, let me ask you how you're doing, Andy.
I'm doing well, and it's good to be back. Yeah, it was nice to have that Thanksgiving break. I went to go watch the Red Wings last week win. They're actually looking all right this year, so that's nice. And football was great this weekend, including football of the other kind, America moving on in the World Cup, knockout stages. Let's go.
So, no soccer talk.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought this was a football podcast.
it is the good kind of football podcast.
All right, that's true. But yeah, no, overall it's great. It's good to be back, and I'm excited to start talking about this college football playoff and discuss, the season as a whole. It's been fun so far.
It's been kind of wild. We even talked a couple pods ago how Alabama was out of it and all that kind of stuff. And they're kind of creeping back up to where people are saying they might even have a shot to get back into the playoffs, which is pretty wild, all things considered. But that kind of shows you the kind of year that we've had, and also shows why I think things are going to be so much better once we get to the actual, like the expanded playoffs and everything. I think, it'll get rid of all this crap of, oh, this team should have been and that team should have been in, like that kind of thing. Everyone's going to get their shot. Everybody will be happy except for the what is it going to be? The 13th team. They'll be pissed that they didn't get in, but everyone else will be happy.
Yeah. No, Lucas and I were talking about it backstage too. And like, as it stands right now with the top four teams, you got Georgia, Michigan, who are obviously going to be in it. TCU, undefeated, they should be in it. And USC, who just has the one loss to Utah earlier in the year on the road. Like, those teams all deserve a chance. And, they have to go and play another game this week. And to think that one of them could lose a game that, the other teams don't have to play, and that's going to hurt them. And a team like Ohio State, who just got the doors blown off them at home by Michigan, could just sneak into the playoffs by sitting on their hands this weekend. I don't think that's right. So, and similarly with Alabama, 2-loss team. We've already seen them lose to Tennessee and LSU. We don't need to see them back in the playoff against Georgia. Let's give these other teams a chance. USC and TCU, we haven't seen them play any of these elite schools yet. So I feel like that's what the playoff should be. I know that won't be the case if there's a loss this week, but I really feel like that's how it should go.
No, I agree. And, like they've earned it for sure. And, Bama has not. From day one, Bama has not looked right. The offense just wasn't ever clicking. Their defense wasn't quite as stout as it normally is and all that. But enough about Bama. Let's get into some of these other teams. Like I said, there's a lot of coaching changes going on right now. Probably the biggest and the first one, I don't know, I guess depending on how you want to look at things, but the one that everyone was saying, who the hell is going to go to Nebraska? There was talks of Urban Meyer going over there. There was a lot of other names thrown in the mix, but here we are with Matt Rule after a massive failure in the NFL, coming back to college. But we've seen plenty of college coaches that just can't quite hack it in the NFL, whether it's they can't get over, the certain things they learned in college or whatever it might be. They don't know how to talk to full grown men instead of college kids, like that kind of thing. But for whatever reason, Rule didn't work out there. But do you think he's going to work out at Nebraska?
It's a little tricky. So yeah, he had a disappointing 2 seasons in the NFL. But obviously, we're not going to forget what he did for Baylor. Baylor was obviously almost left for dead after Art Briles and company set the program on fire with their abuse scandal and everything that was going on back in 2016. But yeah, Rule comes in 2017, understandably had a rough year one, but then by his third year at Baylor, he's in the Sugar Bowl. And Nebraska's historically kind of like a hard-nosed running team, which Rule has kind of indicated in his press conferences that establishing the run is going to be one of his priorities, as well as player development. I think that player development is where Rule does set himself apart. He does more with less than a lot of coaches. I mean, if you look at his Baylor team, his best playmaker was Denzel Mims, who was obviously a great college player, but his quarterback was Charlie Brewer, who couldn't even get on the field for Liberty in his 14th seasons of playing college football this season. If I'm a Nebraska fan, I think I am happy for this hire, just because I think it gives you a better shot to win games. I don't know if I'm going to get excited from a Devy perspective, because typically, we don't have a big sample size with Rule, but he really hasn't produced any like elite NFL talent from his college rosters. But that's something that can certainly change, in an instant as well. But as a Nebraska fan, which I'm not, but if I was, I would be happy, because I think they do become a better team.
One of my good friends, Levi Valentine, is a big Nebraska fan, and he's pretty damn happy. Like, obviously, he wanted Urban Meyer, which sounds crazy, but when you think kind of the same thing, like failed NFL coach, but we know for a fact that he wins when in college and stuff, and so he was perfectly fine, dealing with all the crap that he would have had to dealt with, but to get Urban, but that didn't work out. But I feel like it's kind of the same thing with Matt Rule. Like, he's very happy. He thinks that, it's going to be good things. And, honestly, it cannot get much worse. So I guess when it's all said and done, worst case scenario, they'll be doing exactly the same thing they've been doing for like a decade.
Right, exactly. So, and Nebraska's like one of those big powerhouse schools from 20 years ago. So I think anything that can get teams like that back on the map is a good move. So we'll see what happens, but I like it for Nebraska in the short term, at least.
I agree. All right, so the second one is Luke Fickle going to Wisconsin. I'm guessing you're pretty excited about this one.
On Wisconsin, my Badgers. I didn't think they had a shot in hell at getting Luke Fickle when those reports came. I was just like, Luke Fickle, okay, he's been holding out for Ohio State or Michigan or all these, big name jobs. And why would he go to Wisconsin, who is just, Wisconsin is the same. You could put anybody at Wisconsin. Like, they're going to do 350-pound offensive linemen and just get 2 dynamic backs and pound the ball 50 times a game. But I really feel like Wisconsin, and credit to Barry Alvarez, our athletic director, for finally getting out of their box and trying to bring their offense into this century. And yeah, as a fan, I'm absolutely here for it. So Fickle, for what it's worth, is a defensive coach, first and foremost, but his teams have all been well-rounded offensively. Obviously, he's the first coach to take a group of 5 conference school to the playoff. Last year, the 2021 Cincinnati team had Desmond Ridder, Jerome Ford, and Alec Pierce. All of them were draft picks last spring. And this year, they've got Tyler Scott, their leading receiver, who's a guy I could see a team falling in love with just because he's super fast and athletic. But yeah, Wisconsin, like I said, recruiting massive O-linemen, pounding the rock. It remains to be seen who the offensive coordinator hire is going to be there. I think we can surmise that Wisconsin will be leaning more to a balanced approach moving forward. And the best part is I don't think they need to change much of how they recruit. Like, they can still get those massive O-linemen in state. And bringing in Fickle gives them a name to lure in some of those 4- and 5-star guys that probably wouldn't, normally consider Wisconsin as a destination that they'd want to go to, unless you're like an O-lineman or a running back. So I love the hire for my Badgers. It's a pretty weak division, the Big Ten West. Obviously, Nebraska's getting better. We're getting better. Minnesota, they seem to be decent all the time. Iowa seems like they might be following off a bit, but somebody needs to rise at the top on that side of the conference. And, I think with this hire, it definitely gives the Badgers a bit of an edge.
Yeah, I like it a lot. I know there's been rumors of Braylon Allen possibly transferring out. Do you think that squashes all of that?
It's hard to say because anytime there's a coaching change, you never know what's going through a player's mind because he went to a school thinking one thing and now, a new guy's coming in who you don't even know. But I think a
Right.
name like Fickle, like if you're a football player, you know who that is and like that means a lot. So I think if you're going to stay because you believe in Fickle. So I think he stays personally, but I guess we'll see.
Yeah, like I said, we're going to have a lot to talk about when it comes to that transfer portal here in probably a couple weeks or so. And then the last one is Hugh Freeze going to Auburn. Another one where just there were so many names thrown out of who it could possibly be. I mean, I guess that's probably like the norm for all these teams is whenever there's a vacancy, it's just you start hearing name after name after name. But I honestly don't know a lot about Hugh Freeze, but from the little bit that I've heard, there's some scandalous stuff that's happened in the past and everything. And so, do you think the team can? I mean, clearly the team thinks that they can move past that and get back to football. Do you think that's the case?
Yeah, I do think it is the case, but yeah, Hugh Freeze has a little problem with messaging hookers and doing a few other not so savory things. But speaking purely from a football perspective, he does come back to the SEC where he's previously the coach at Ole Miss from 2012 to 16. Most recently, he's been at Liberty since 2019, where he amassed a 34-15 record, 4 straight bowl appearances, 3-0 in all the bowls that he's played in so far or coached in so far. NFL fans are probably going to hear Liberty head coach and immediately associate him with Malik Willis, which I think is fair. He did help orchestrate Willis's transfer from Auburn, ironically, and develop him in that offense. But I think the bigger feather in Freeze's proverbial cap is his ability to identify and develop wide receivers. At Ole Miss, he oversaw Laquan Treadwell, who obviously got drafted in the first round. Obviously, that didn't quite work out in the NFL, but he was a first-round draft pick, so I know that it's got to mean something. But more importantly, he recruited NFL studs DK Metcalf and AJ Brown in his last recruiting class in 2016. At Liberty, obviously, it was more of the Malik Willis first offense, but he did have Demario Douglas there, who looked decent this year. And early on at Liberty, if you remember this name, Antonio Gandy Golden, another wide receiver, everyone's favorite 4th-round rookie pick from 2020.
Oh man, he got some hype in the rookie drafts.
Oh my God. So that's
or at least
another,
before. I don't remember if it was during the rookie drafts or if it was like before the NFL draft, but I remember him getting some hype before he went to Washington, right?
Yeah, he went to Washington. Gandy Golden. Yeah, everyone thought he was going to be a thing. But yeah, that was another Hugh Freeze wide receiver. So I like what it could possibly mean for the Auburn wide receiver room, which historically, like what we've talked about with Nebraska and Wisconsin, like Auburn has been a run first team. Like I can't think of a wide receiver that they've ever put in the NFL. So I do like it from an offensive standpoint. I think it does diversify the offense a little bit. And also Auburn has to look at like what he did when he was with Ole Miss. When he was there, he beat Alabama 2 years in a row. I think all Auburn really cares about is beating Alabama. So if they get a guy who can do that, like he could be a serial killer. I don't think they care, they just want to beat Alabama. So I think it's a decent hire from a football perspective. I won't give my opinions on the morality of it all.
All right, I guess that's the major ones that we have so far. I'm sure there will be some other ones that we'll talk about. Will Levis declared. We were talking about it before, like we don't really know why. I mean, I guess we do know why, because somebody, whether it's scouts or NFL experts or draft experts or whatever, like somebody is telling him that he's going to get a first round draft capital. And so, no, we cannot talk about basketball or soccer. But like somebody's telling him he's going to get first round draft capital, and he very well may. I mean, we've seen much worse, first round picks. So like, it wouldn't blow my mind or anything like that. But we've also, we were talking before we jumped on here how it doesn't really matter. Like, we don't think he's a good player. So, I can promise you I will have 0 Will Levis, even if he's drafted at 101 in the NFL draft. I will not have a single Will Levis on my teams unless somebody drops him once they realize he's terrible. And I'm like, I'll take him for free off the waivers.
Yeah. And kind of like what we were talking about backstage, it's just like, what other choice does he have? He's just been hyped up as his first round pick all year long, maybe the better part of 2 years. So going back isn't going to do him anything. Like, he's not going to go back and be any worse, or be any better. So it's just a matter of, just cashing in right now while the the getting's good, and see if you can maybe trick a team into drafting you, which it sounds like he might, but maybe he won't. Everyone thought Malik Willis and Sam Howell and all these guys are going to be first round picks last year, and that obviously didn't come to fruition either. So we'll see what happens come April.
Yeah, I don't know if it was just a blip, and last year was kind of crazy where like the teams were like, yeah, we're just not going to draft any QBs, like the Steelers drafted Pickett, and that they might be seeing that as a mistake now, who knows? But like the rest of the teams were just like, yeah, we're not going to take them. So is it a blip? Is it going to continue? I guess we'll have to wait and see. If it's like the new norm where these guys keep getting hyped up for like first round draft capital, and then they go in like the 4th round, then these QBs might start staying until their 5th year.
Yeah, why not? Especially with like NIL money on the table, like might as well get a couple million while you still can. If you're just going to end up being drafted in the 5th round like Sam Howell, God, why did that happen?
I still, it makes no sense. I guess it makes sense why he's not playing right now, because like they think that they have a shot, and I guess technically they do, but I'm like, yeah, come on, guys. That's just a coach trying to keep his job. But Sam Howell should be on the field. Like Taylor Heineke is terrible, and he keeps getting to play for whatever damn reason. So we were talking about the college football playoffs a little bit. You kind of discussed what you think is going to happen, but are there any any surprises that you see coming, that might switch it up, and who do you think are going to be the final 4 when it's all said and done?
So if anything happens this weekend, I think the most likely scenario of something crazy happening is TCU falling to Kansas State. Kansas State has looked a whole lot better with Will Howard as their quarterback as compared to Adrian Martinez. They've obviously got Deuce Vaughn, who's a super dynamic college football player. So if that happens and TCU loses, the committee's going to have a real interesting time figuring out who the 4th team is, because you're either going to put Ohio State in, who got embarrassed at home last week by a team that's already in the playoff. You're going to put 2-loss Bama team in, who there's never been a 2-loss team in the college football playoff, or you're going to, I guess that's really the only other options other than to keep TCU in, which is what I think should happen. So if it were up to me, that's what would be my playoff as it stands today. 1, Georgia; 2, Michigan; 3, TCU; and 4, USC.
Is there any actual reason for them to put out the full list of 25 rankings? Is just because like that's what they always do? It's the top 25, because it's not like even like Kansas State, if they win this week, like they're not going to jump into the playoffs or anything. Like, is there any other reason, or is it just like that's the norm? Like they've always done like the top 25 ranked and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I think it's just because our minds have just been conditioned to have 25 teams ranked for college sports.
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure, because I'm like, it's like I said, like it's not like all of a sudden Clemson's going to jump up in there, or, like one of these other teams. Right. So really, it's Ohio State or Alabama that have like a small shot at getting in, and then otherwise it's going to be those 4.
Right, and I think it should be those 4. Like, we don't need to see any more Alabama or Ohio State. They've already shown us that they're not good enough. So move on from them.
Right. Now, Ohio State doesn't have a game. Do we know who does Bama play? Do we know?
Bama doesn't either. So it's going
they don't have a game. Okay. So they're not. Yeah, they're not in the championship.
Right. And that's the other thing. It's like these other teams are actually playing for something. So you can't just let some other teams back into the playoff while these other teams are actually playing meaningful games right now.
Yeah, that'd be terrible. I don't know how they could possibly do that. That'd be pretty wild. But I know we've talked about that in the past, like in past years, or at least I've heard about it. We haven't talked about it, but like I've heard about like teams talking about that. Like how does Ohio State, not have to play for a championship, but yet these other teams do and things like that.
Yeah. No, I know that was a big thing during the 2020 season too. Like Ohio State barely had to play any games and then got
they
in,
were just
but
like giving it.
basically.
Andy's making many excellent points. That is very true. He that's what he does. And
Par for the course.
If you want to hear more of his excellent points, make sure you're checking out the Devy recap every week. I believe it comes out on Tuesdays.
It does, Tuesday morning.
And check that out either on the pod form or on YouTube. Make sure you subscribe and do all that kind of good stuff so you can check everything else that's going on here and the whole Full Tilt Dynasty podcast network. But why don't we go ahead and take a little break, and then we will get back and do our 2022 year in review.
With the number 1 pick, I am taking still Breece Hall.
Yeah, I don't think that doesn't surprise most people.
Yeah, he's extremely young. He's extremely talented. He's on a team that clearly wants to use him. Even if he comes back next year and he's 80% of who he was this year, I think he's an RB1. And when he comes back fully healthy after year 2, if we assume that's what's going to happen, he's still going to be younger than Najee Harris when he was drafted. So, I mean, Breece Hall still has such a long career ahead of him. I'm so happy to take him here, number 1.
I listened to that podcast today while I was working, and it's a good one. Definitely go check it out. There was some good information on there, but I swear there was a couple points that they made that had me tilting my ass off. I think one of them was they were talking about Chris Olave and how, they're still not sure that they're going to, go after these fourth year guys, seniors and stuff like that, just because of Chris Olave. And I'm like, well, it's not just Chris Olave. There's a lot of other players. Like, stop worrying so much about early declare and non-early declare. Let's just worry about the good players.
It used to matter more, I feel like, but
yeah,
now it seems like, I feel
like COVID changed everything, because then everyone just stayed and there's, of course, there's still going to be early declares, but, just because somebody came out year 3 doesn't make them better than a year 4 player when the year 4 player is an absolute stud from Ohio State.
Yeah. Yeah. I got to listen to that podcast because I saw what they were doing, and obviously that's interesting to me. I love hearing.
It was, like I said, it was a good podcast. There was definitely a lot of good discussion and everything. But there was a couple of things. I ended up sliding into the Tommy T's DMs, and we got into an argument for about 3 hours because of it. So that was fun.
Jesus. You guys got too much time on your hands.
We do. I was bored. I was bored at work. But so our main event today is going to be talking about the 2022 season, our hits and misses, whether we're right or wrong on a player being good or a player being bad. So we can take some victory laps. We can also hide behind our computer desks and all that for the bad ones. But there was definitely some good ones. But why don't we start with the shitty takes, the bad takes, and what was your biggest miss? Somebody that just somebody was bad, or someone that you thought was going to be good and ended up being bad, I should say.
Yeah. Okay. So for me, this one was easy. And it's Cameron Ward from Washington State. I had him in my preseason top 10 quarterbacks. I'll be the first to admit it was bad process. I'm not the only analyst to fall prey to it, but we all sort of wanted to capture that Bailey Zappi magic from a couple seasons ago and then transpose it onto a Power 5 conference team. And that simply just did not happen. He started off bad and he didn't get much better. Finished the season with less than 7 yards per attempt, only 23 touchdowns to 8 interceptions. Also had 8 fumbles. QBR was not good at 60.5. Still better than Will Levis, but not good. And it was just a tough season. And the step up from the FCS to Power 5 may have been too big. But I think I learned now that I shouldn't just look at raw numbers from the FCS and think that it can just automatically happen in the Power 5 conference. Now, Bailey Zappi's not unheard of. I think that's still a possibility that you can go from the FCS and still dominate in the Sun Belt. But I will definitely be more trepidatious in thinking that just because a guy dominated at Incarnate Word, he's all of a sudden an NFL draft, candidate. So I learned something. So did I really miss
one that I was? Yeah, I mean, as long as you learn, I get you can't really miss. And
it's the lessons we learn along the way.
That was another thing that me and Tommy T were arguing about. We're gonna have to do a pod with the three of us, and we can really get into it because, I was trying to say, like better process, and he was like, no, results. I'm like, no, let's worry about the process, baby. But with Ward, I was fine missing on him. Like if he was going to hit, like people started getting really hyped, putting him into the top 10. You weren't the only one. And I was just perfectly fine missing on him in C2C leagues and Devy leagues, whatever, because it's such a huge jump going from FCS to FBS. And I just didn't think it was going to work out, and it didn't work out. And I mean, I was like, he very well could have worked out and I would have been wrong, but he was one of those where I was like, you know what? It's such a huge jump. What are the odds that he's just going to be the stud just because he did it at such a low level? So that one hurts. But if you learned your lesson, then I guess that's all that really matters.
I did.
My big miss. I mean, there's some. I don't know. I'm trying to think of like players that I was like really hyped on that ended up missing. I can't think of too many, but Jaden Reed, I was really high on going into the season. I think I told you, at one point I had him in my top 20 wide receivers. So, that's pretty high. But it was all based off of that junior season he had. And, he put up 1,026 yards, 17.4 yards per reception, 10 touchdowns. Like everything looked great in his junior year. And then he comes back for a senior year. I know he dealt with some injuries and stuff. I watched a couple of his games, and he had some flashes and stuff, but he ended up with playing 11 games, 636 yards, 5 touchdowns, just not what I was hoping for out of Jaden Reed. Not to say that he had some terrible year, but I mean, what are the odds that he gets drafted with any kind of like quality draft capital at this point? It doesn't seem very likely. And I definitely was wrong for having him in my top 20. That's for damn sure.
Yeah, definitely not the season we wanted for Jaden Reed. I will say he's got, top end speed, which is great. That's NFL teams are going to love it. And he got invited to the Senior Bowl, and the Senior Bowl does wonders for draft stock. Now, I'm not saying he's going to be a day 2 pick or anything, but I do think he's going to get drafted, reasonably, not maybe like early day 3. Just because he's a special teamer at the very least. Like he's going to return kicks and be a gunner on punt team or whatever. So I think a team's going to want him just to, have depth on their roster just because they can use him on special teams as well. And, those are the type of guys that end up getting opportunities later in the season, and maybe he does hit. So, I get what you're saying. Like not top 20, but I still like Jaden Reed. I think he could still be something down the road.
Yeah, no, it was definitely more about my ranking than even the player per se.
Right. No, for
All
sure.
Right. Honestly, that off the top of my head, that was the best one that I could come up with. I'm sure there were some.
I know
others.
you're just too perfect.
Too good. Too good.
Yeah.
No, I drafted. I never really truly believed in Tyler Buckner, but I drafted him fairly early in my C2C league. Because there's a major rushing component in that league, and I felt like he was going to be a rushing QB and get me a bunch of points that way. And so I guess technically that was a pretty big miss because I drafted him in the 4th round of my C2C, and that one hurt.
Yeah, that's where he was going. I mean,
yeah,
I don't know.
I mean, I even kind of reached on him a little bit. Like I felt like I had him as like a 5th or 6th round pick. But I reached on him because of the scoring system in that league where you only get 1 point for every 30 yards passing, and it's only 4 yards for or 4 points for a passing touchdown, compared to your normal rushing and all that. So it just really pushes up the rushing QBs. And so I was like, oh, there's not that many left, and I better go get Buckner. And yeah, that didn't work out.
Yeah, I don't know what's going to happen there because obviously he got hurt and was done for the year, and Drew Pine's been okay. I don't know if he has to transfer now or what, so we'll see what happens. But he did not look good in the games that he was playing, that's for sure.
All right, so who was a big hit for you this year? Somebody that you were higher on than consensus.
All right, so I think I had an obvious one here, but I mean, maybe you're going to talk about it, so if you don't, then we'll just both talk about it. But this one, I'll just say, and then you probably aren't going to like it, but Kenny McIntosh, who I was pounding the table for all offseason, I thought he was the more complete back compared to Kendall Milton, and I was absolutely 100% correct. Rushing stats, not popping off the page at you, but he did finish with a ridiculous 13% reception market share. He has the size to be kind of used as like that wide back in the NFL. He did run 12% of his routes from the slot and 8% spread out wide. Has a positive ADOT, yards per route run at 2.4. And most importantly, I think, is he has that Georgia running back pedigree, which we've seen can get dudes drafted earlier than you would think. And we're looking directly at you, James Cook. So I don't think day 2 is out of the question for Kenny Mack. But he will for sure be drafted, and he will be utilized in the NFL on offense. And I like him as a potential second-round Dynasty rookie pick. And he's a guy, I was basically getting for free in Campus to Canton supplemental drafts last season. So big hit there for me, I think.
Yeah, I'm not a huge fan of the player, but I get what you're saying. Like everyone and their mother, except for me and you, apparently, were we're all over Kendall Milton, like for the longest time. Like he's going to be the stud, he's the next big thing. But I think the problem is they were comparing him to Zamir White, who's not the next big thing either. So, that maybe that's where the issue is. But I get what you're saying. Like McIntosh wasn't barely talked about, and yet he's definitely been the better player. I mean, like people don't even talk about Kendall Milton anymore. Like it's just but at the beginning of the season, it was Milton. He's the RB5 in the class and stuff like that. And now he's, just completely gone, an afterthought. So I don't know. I'm pretty sure I will not be taking him in the second round of my rookie drafts, but
no, I know you won't.
I could easily see him being a third round pick for me though.
I mean, just the way the NFL is today, like you want that third down back in your PPR leagues because that's where the value's at. I picture like a Rashad White type player, I think, where he's going to be versatile and has the potential to be every down, but probably won't get there, for a while, if at all.
Yeah, I think White's a much better runner though.
Yeah, definitely.
But I mean, but he could easily have a role in the NFL. So I like the pick. So this one was a pretty easy answer for me, but I feel like I've talked about Drake May for, the past 3 or 4 pods. So I'm not going to talk about Drake May being my big hit, even though I was all over him. It makes me want to go back in. I don't know if I talked about it on this pod or not, but I created a high school quarterback model. And I put in all of their high school stats. I had, what's her name? The diva of Devy. I cannot think of her last name right now, but
Flowers?
Katie Flowers. Yeah, Katie Flowers. Thank you. I don't know why I just blanked on her name, but I had her help me. We put together this database with all of the high school stats of all like the big name QBs, all the prospects and everything from years and years and years. And I went through and I made this huge model and I put everything together and there was definitely some hits. And so I'm like, oh shit, this is actually working. But then I really started like looking at it and I'm like, wait, maybe it's not working. I don't know. But Drake May was in the top 10. The whole point of the story is Drake May was in the top 10 of this model. And it was like 200 and something high school quarterbacks in this model. He was top 10 all time, however far back we went, like 10 years or whatever it was. And so he truly stood out. And like, I don't know if that high school model really matters or like works or not, but he always stood out to me. Being a 5-star prospect, Bama wanted him, all that kind of stuff. I was all over him. But like I said, I've talked about him enough. That was probably even more than I should have. Another player that I've talked about quite a bit is Blake Quorum. And so
that was my other one. I was like, yeah, I think John's going to dunk on this one, so it's fine.
Yeah, it was just too easy. And you were right there with me, but I feel like I was kind of, like driving that train or whatever you want to call it. Like I was all over that. People thought that Donovan Edwards was just going to completely take his job. And that just was never the case. And I didn't think it was going to be the case because yes, he's small, but he's a hell of a running back. And I kind of foresaw what, he did this year. And it kind of sucks because he got hurt, the last couple of weeks. Like he could have had a much bigger season. And, if he has like 1,700 rushing yards or something like that by the end of the year, I think people really might take notice at that point. Not to say that they haven't taken notice, but I still hear people saying, oh, Quorum, it's just Michigan. It's just their offensive line. Oh, he's too small, like whatever. I just don't think he quite gets the recognition he deserves. But there was people that completely written him off at the beginning of the season, and no one has written him off anymore. Like they might say that they're a little lower on him because he's small or whatever, but I'd say he's earned 99.9% of people's respect.
Yes, they finally started listening to us, which is nice. But we were right all along. And I will say Donovan Edwards, who we didn't hate, we just said Blake Quorum was better, and Donovan Edwards looked great in relief. Especially against Ohio State last week. He had 200 yards. He has the 2 longest running plays in the Michigan and Ohio State rivalry, and he did it like in back-to-back runs. So, yeah, shout out to Donovan Edwards. But, yeah, no hate on him, but Blake Quorum, we were right. So we will definitely be taking that victory lap.
You love to see it. And to this day, I still only have Edwards like 4 spots behind Quorum in my ranks. So, it just goes to show, like, I definitely have never hated Edwards by any means. And it's getting used to the like Devy and C2C stuff, like where just these good players end up sitting behind other good players. And it just, whether it's the way the coaching works or, the college season works, I really don't quite get it, but it's just one of those things where there seems to be kind of like a hierarchy and everyone just kind of follows it. It's like, all right, it's Quorum's turn. All right, it's Edwards' turn.
Yeah, especially some of, Michigan's a little bit more old school than some of these other programs. And they definitely do, favors seniority a little bit. It's more, not so much of like a meritocracy, but Quorum deserved it. Like this wasn't a thing of like, oh, give the senior or the junior the totes over the sophomore. He was just a better running back.
Yeah, I think if Edwards was that much better than him, he wouldn't have held him off or anything like that. He would have just taken over the job, and that wasn't the case, which is another reason why I really love Quorum. I do think he's going to be great, and I just truly don't care that he's 5'8". I really don't.
Nope.
All right, so what was a player that ended up being good that you were just completely out on? I know there's one that we were both completely wrong on that I don't think we can both say.
Well, we might both have to because it's pretty glaring, but it's Rocket Sanders. And we've hit on it multiple times. I've personally mentioned it on the Devy recap a few times. I faded him bad this year. I thought KJ Jefferson was going to lead the team in rushing. I thought Dominique Johnson was a better pure runner on the team. I thought the offense would be terrible without Treylon Burks, but Sanders rose above all that, put up a monster season. And then as we saw from my Devy recap a couple of years ago, he's my 2024 RB1 now at this point in time. So unfortunately, since I faded him to no end, I don't have any shares of him and probably won't until 2024 since the price of his Devy shares has just gotten out of hand at this point. But he's going to finish the season with over 1,500 yards rushing, 10 touchdowns. He forces a missed tackle on nearly 30% of his carries. Breakaway yards per attempt is over 3, which is really good. Yards per team play is almost 2. He's hitting all of my metrics, and he has the size and athleticism to boot. So, Yeah, I dropped the ball there with Rocket Sanders, but I'm willing to admit when I was wrong, and I was wrong here.
Yeah, and I'm right there with you. I was definitely wrong, and he's moved into that elite territory for me. So, and I'm once again, we've learned we're not just sticking to our priors or anything like that. But just to throw someone else out there, I'll give you some props here. You were all about Izzy Abanaconda at the beginning of the year. And I told you right then and there, I had him as like my RB 70 or something like that. It was somewhere in like the 60 or 70 range. And he's my RB 24 as of right now. So, like not elite or by any means or anything like that, but
Right.
definitely much better than I gave him credit for. He's had some huge games. He's also had some lackluster games, but I think he's proven that he can at least be a like quality backup at the very least, and if not more than that. And obviously, if I was giving him RB 60 to 70, that's not even giving him recognition for that. So I definitely admit that I was wrong. Honestly, I was trying to look through like some wide receivers and stuff like that. I don't really feel like I talked crap about any like players that ended up being amazing, like Quentin Johnston, but like we've seen him be hit or miss. We've seen him, miss games and start the season off so weird. And I never said he was going to be bad. I just said that he wasn't going to be this top 3 wide receiver that everyone had him ranked as. And I still feel that way. So I mean, maybe you'll tell me differently, but I don't feel like I was wrong on that one.
Yeah, no, I mean, yeah, he's such an anomaly, man. Like he could go for 200 one day and then completely disappear the next week. So it's just a really tough evaluation. But yeah, for me, like I'd rather have Jordan Addison, probably JSN, just because that junior season is unreal, or that sophomore season, I should say, even though he's been hurt. And after that, I could probably be convinced into taking Josh Downs over Quentin Johnston too. So yeah, I don't know if he's in my top 3 either, but he's just one of those rare athletic specimens that you just have to like take a shot on at some point too. And just,
Right.
off shot that he might be Kelvin Johnson,
Yeah, I don't know if he has like, I mean, I don't really, I wasn't paying attention to Calvin Johnson's route running and stuff like that in the beginning of his career or in his college career. So I can't compare the two players, but I've heard a lot about, from the film grinders, Quentin Johnson doesn't really actually run routes. He just runs goes, and like, that's all fine and dandy in college. That's not going to really work out 99% of the time in the NFL. So like, I get he's a freak of nature and he's the size you want, the speed you want and all that kind of stuff. But I don't know if he's actually a wide receiver.
Yeah, and that's kind of the problem with a lot of these Big 12 wide receivers once they get to the NFL is like they're used to playing in these air raid, just run and shoot offenses. And then, Denzel Mims shows up to the NFL and can't see the field. So I'm not saying that's going to happen with Quentin Johnston, but, it happened with Jalen Reagor, who is also, a Big 12 wide receiver. It happens a lot with Big 12 wide receivers. I don't know what's in the water over there, but they really just don't seem to catch on in the NFL.
When you're just getting the big play over and over again, you don't truly have to learn how to be a wide receiver, and then when you go to the NFL, you're like, wait, this isn't working for some reason.
Right. Oh, wait, these cornerbacks are a lot faster than the guys I was playing against. So.
Yeah, and bigger.
Yeah.
All right, so why don't we wrap it up with our big hits? Like these are the ones that everyone was down on. They hated them, and we were. Or, I'm sorry, no, these are the ones that we were lower on, and they yeah. So sorry, I screwed that one up.
Nope,
these are the ones that we were lower on, and everyone else was high on, and we were right the whole damn time.
So I feel like there's about 50 quarterbacks that I could say right now, but for me, I'll just say it was Jackson Dart. I talked a lot this offseason about volatility of the QB position in Devy specifically. I identified a few players that I thought would fall victim to that QB value cliff. Tyler Buckner, who you mentioned earlier, I said that he's a potential candidate to get wrecked, and he did. Tyler Van Dyke from Miami, I thought he was going to, potentially lose a lot of value. I think he has, which he's been all right towards the back end, but he's obviously been dealing with injuries and stuff too.
Yeah.
But I was right on Tyler Buckner for sure. But my biggest fade was Jackson Dart, because he was going the earliest and he had done nothing to warrant that high of a draft pick. I think he had an ADP in the second round, and he really hasn't improved at all since what we saw at USC. His QBR, it's respectable, 73.5 yards per attempt, hovering right around 8. Again, just all right. 18 touchdowns to 8 picks, which is, again, whatever. 550 yards rushing. Very cool, but just does not really get me going at all, and doesn't put him anywhere near a pro level prospect. This is the same offense last year where we saw Matt Corral dominate for 2 seasons. Dart just hasn't really lived up to the hype. I'm happy to report that I don't have any shares of him at this time, and I probably never will. But yeah, that was a easy fade for a guy that was going in the second round. I was like, there's just no way. Like, Jackson Dart, come on.
Yeah, and we could probably go over like every QB from last year and do victory laps on them, because I really wasn't in on hardly any of them. But Dart really sticks out. Like I never understood it. Like he put up terrible numbers in the Pac-12, and then people are like, no, he's going to transfer to the SEC and he's going to get better. It's like, wait, what? I just it never made any sense. So I'm right there with you on that one too. Yeah, that was an easy, because there was a lot of people that were still all about him. And I think, after, it's so much easier to say like a guy like Drew Lahr or like a Devin Brown or like these high star guys that haven't seen the field or haven't seen the field very much. Like it's pretty easy to just be like, all right, I'm holding on to my priors with them. But when you actually see a guy go out and just look terrible, how can you sit there and be like, oh yeah, like he's having to transfer out because he's not good, and just to hold on to hope and draft him early. I'm not saying you can't keep him on your roster, draft him late, do all that kind of stuff, but to draft him early in the second round of Devy and C2C drafts, like that's just wild. I don't get that at all.
Yep. Like I said, happy to report I did not do that at all. I mean, I don't have the ADP in front of me right now. I'm pretty sure I was getting guys like Will Shipley around that time, which, better than Jackson Dart, I'd say. But so good on us to fade the quarterbacks there for sure.
Definitely.
Did you have anyone else that you were a big fade for?
Yeah, I mean, obviously Tank Bigsby.
Mostly quarterback. Oh, right, yeah.
Yeah, mostly, but we've talked about him so much, and people still love him. So I don't even know if I can truly victory lap yet. Like there's still people talking about him being a top 5 running back in the class and all that kind of stuff. So I don't feel like I can truly, but I was all over. I could bring up like DMs with Kevin Coleman at Du Bois from the Devy Royale in the offseason talking about Kendall Milton is not it. I was always out on Kendall Milton. I never understood. It's the same thing I was just talking about with Jackson Dart. Like I get it's RBU and they don't, like they don't force guys onto the field and they don't run with the full workhorse and all that kind of stuff. But Kendall Milton hardly even saw the field. And when he did, he was terrible. So I never understood why people were all about him. And once again, putting him in like the top 5 of the class. It just never made sense, and he's a complete afterthought. Like I might not be able to say that about Tank just yet, but like Milton is an actual afterthought in this class. He's not going to be drafted. I'm assuming he's going to transfer or do something. I have no idea what he's going to do.
Yeah, I don't know either. I mean, he might as well just stay, I think. But yeah, Tank Bigsby, he really he put a better second half to the season than the first half. I'll just say that. But I'm still not in on him at all, really. I mean, I have a few shares of him, but I'm definitely not, trying to acquire him. I'll just leave it at that.
Yeah, that's the whole thing. And like you said, he finished with a decent year, but that's what he had last year. He had a decent year, and maybe it ends up being like hyperbolic, but people like hype him so much that it just makes me want to be like, all right, well, I'm never going to end up with them, so I might as well just hate him, because somebody's always going to take him before me. Because I mean, there's people talking about him being I just listened to a Devy podcast, and I won't name names or anything like that, but like I listened to a Devy podcast do a rookie mock recently, and Tank Bigsby was in the first round of a 2023 rookie mock, super flex, tight end premium, all that kind of stuff. Tank Bigsby, first round pick. Like, no, thank you.
Yeah, that's brutal. That's just, it feels lazy to me. Like you just haven't watched anything this year because there's so many guys that have stepped up. So,
and I think that's the problem. It's not even necessarily, like I said, he basically did what he did last year. So it's not like he's even dropped off or done anything like that. It's just these other guys are just completely skyrocketing and jumping like so far ahead of him. And people are like, nope, Tank in the first.
hey, more power to him.
It kind of blows my mind. But so that was some good reminiscing there with some hits and misses that we had. I'm glad that I was able to find some misses. I didn't want Andy
you
to
really
feel
had
left
to
out here.
Yeah, John had to go dug deep. We'll just say that.
I'm not even 100% sure that I didn't do it intentionally at the time so that I could have something to talk about now.
Oh, well, thank you. That's nice of you. Very
I mean,
courteous.
just for you, buddy. That's what I do. That's what I do. All right. Why don't we take a quick little break here, and then we will get back and we'll talk about the championship week, college football playoff run-ups and all that kind of stuff.
I'm taking Chris Olave at 102. He's an alpha receiver. I think that he's shown that. I think he's done everything he could possibly do. He's doing it with less than amazing quarterback play, to be honest with you. I thought maybe he would be the outside guy. I thought maybe he would be just a deep guy. Nah, he's a do everything guy. He's red zone. He is what he is, which is elite. He's run 336 routes. He has the best PFF receiving grade. He's averaging 14.2 points per game, highest in this rookie class. Just down across the board, elite player, and not just for a rookie, as just a general wide receiver.
I missed the beginning of that one. Who are they talking about?
Chris Olave. I got to really listen to this episode now. They took him at 102.
Yeah, it's a very wild episode, to say at least, going from the conversation they had about why were people wrong about Chris Olave to then taking him at the 102. It's like, oh, maybe he's just good at football, guys. Maybe we should look at that first.
Yeah, that's the whole thing. Like they went on to talk about how like they're not changing their process, and they'd probably still miss on Olave. And I'm like, wait, something's not right here, guys. But it's definitely a good pod to check it out. But we are here on episode 185 of the Full Tilt Dynasty Podcast Network, and we are brought to you by Underdog Fantasy. And I want you guys to go check out their Pick'ems contest. They talk about it a lot on the Full Tilt Dynasty podcast, where they actually do their full Underdog Fantasy Pick'ems contest. They go through all their picks, and basically just all you have to do, pick your overs and unders on the for the players. If you think they're gonna have more yards, score more touchdowns, whatever it might be, do all that, and you can win some money, have some fun while you're playing and watching football, all that kind of stuff. But even better than that, you can get a free $100 deposit match by using the promo code Full Tilt at underdogfantasy.com. That is promo code Full Tilt at underdogfantasy.com. So check that out. Do some pick'ems. Let us know if you won some big money, and we will definitely be talking to you about that again. But for now, let's go ahead and get into this championship week, and we're going to do what we've basically done every week so far this year. We're going to pick one Power 5 conference game against the spread, and then we're going to pick one player to highlight for championship week. I'll go ahead and let Andy start off right here.
All right, so I'm going to pick the only championship game that really doesn't have any implications, and that is UNC versus Clemson for the ACC championship. UNC is 7.5-point underdog, kind of backing into this championship game after back-to-back losses against Georgia Tech and NC State. And your boy, Drake May, has been part of the problem, honestly. Only 5.5 yards per attempt during that stretch with a touchdown.
That's been weird. I know
2 picks.
Josh Downs has been hurt, but it hasn't been rough looking, though.
Yeah. But, I mean, I'm not taking a crap on Drake May because this is a guy who's getting Heisman buzz and was possibly the front runner just 2 weeks ago. I know Clemson's defense is great and UNC's is horrible, but I think May and Downs, assuming he's healthy, get back on track and keep this thing at least within a touchdown. I think even UNC's god-awful defense can keep the Clemson offense in check. So it's either going to be a shootout or like some weird low-scoring game. But in both of those scenarios, I'll take points with UNC 7.5.
I love it. It has been a rough go around, but I'm hoping that Josh Downs gets a little healthier. And I don't know, it's been almost like a night and day thing with UNC's offense and Drake May. It's been really weird because he was, I think at this point, if he had continued the last 2 weeks what he was doing before that, he would easily be the Heisman front runner. Like, because everyone's kind of fallen off. Ohio State lost. CJ Stroud didn't look amazing. Caleb Williams has looked, good all year. I don't know if he's ever looked perfect or amazing or anything like that to where everyone's going to say, oh, he's the best football player in college football or anything like that. Drake May has definitely looked like that, during the season, just not the last couple of weeks. So I feel like those hopes have died recently, but I don't know, maybe he can blow up this week and win the championship and get right back into it.
Yeah. I mean, you bring up a good point because Bryce Young hasn't been as phenomenal as he was last year. Quorum obviously got injured and kind of missed his Heisman moment.
I was going to say Quorum. It probably would have been Quorum, and then he gets hurt. I'm like, damn it.
If he would have had a big game against Ohio State, it would have been his award. But it's too bad. Unfortunately, he was hurt. But yeah, I think he get back on track. Like I think Drake May's good enough to where he can put points up against. And this team just lost to South Carolina, and I know. Lucas isn't a fan of South Carolina right now, unfortunately, but they're not a great team. So I think if Clemson can lose to South Carolina, they can also lose to UNC pretty easily.
I'm going to be eating more chicken wings than ever before just to get back at South Carolina a little bit more. And I think the right answer for the Heisman conversation was Hendon Hooker. It hurts even more seeing how CJ Stroud struggled against Michigan. I think if Hendon Hooker would have finished strong at the end of the season, he would have had a legitimate shot.
He's definitely in the mix.
Caleb Williams, who has had a really good year. I don't look at him as having like one of the elite seasons. I mean, you can only have so many Joe Burrow seasons in the history of college football. I mean,
right.
You think about like the elite of the elite Heisman years, but it does hurt a little bit more to see how the season ended and go, dang. Hendon Hooker has shot.
I definitely believe that he was in the mix for sure. That injury was terrible. I hate it because I feel like not only do I hate it for Lucas, not only do I hate it for Tennessee fans and everything that was going with that team, but I hate it for the NFL draft because it was just another QB that I felt it was going to be viable. And now I think he's going to be like a 5th round pick, sixth round pick, something like that. And that's not going to lead to quality time, or you can't expect time for a player like that. Just like we saw with Sam Howell this year, as much as it sucks, you can love the player, but when they get that kind of draft capital, not to say they can't get on the field, which makes it a lot more difficult.
Yeah, we didn't get a chance to talk about it last week after it happened, unfortunately, but it was horrible. I mean, it's bad for Hendon Hooker, I think, more than anything, because like you said, it's his draft capital that's going to get hurt. Like, who's to say he even gets drafted? Because he's probably not going to be able to play next year. Like, if a team drafts him, they're just going to be paying him to sit on their, IR for a season. So it stinks. But it is what it is, I guess. It's the nature of the game, unfortunately. But hope for the best for him. I don't know. Can he come back? Maybe with the COVID years, be like a 26.
He was already a 6-year senior, so no, he unfortunately cannot come back.
Not that he couldn't even play next year anyhow, I guess, because he's got the ACL tear. But
exactly,
too bad.
Yeah, that's rough. All right, so for mine, I honestly did not dig too deep. I know it's a shock, but I feel like Michigan basically played their Super Bowl last week, and went all in to beat Ohio State, and now they're playing against Purdue. I feel like Purdue has had a better defense than maybe they're being given credit here for here with the 16.5 line. I'm like, I just think that maybe Michigan's going to be a little tired, a little worn out, whatever from that game last week. And I just don't know that it's going to be that big of a deficit. I'm definitely not calling for Michigan to lose this game by any means. I just don't know if it's going to be, over more than 2 touchdowns worth, of a difference there.
Yeah, I could see that. Aiden O'Connell in that offense, Payne Durham, Chuck Sizzle, Charlie Jones. Yeah, they can put up points on anybody. So I know Michigan's defense is really good, but their coach Braum is an offensive quote unquote guru, I would say. So he's going to be passing the ball a ton. And then they've got Devin Maccabee, who I talked about previously. He's a decent enough running back. So I think they can keep Michigan's going to win. I don't think anyone's going to say anything about that, but yeah, keeping it close. Why not?
Yeah, and honestly, like that was the best that like JJ McCarthy has looked all season for the most part. Quorum is still not healthy. Edwards looked amazing last week, but I'm not to say that he won't look good again. But I feel like they're not at 100% health. And like Cornelius Johnson came out of nowhere. I was actually not all in. I really liked Cornelius Johnson going into the season. I definitely should not have said all in because I think I drafted him in like the 15th round or something like that in my C2C league. But I liked him. I felt like he had a shot to be the number one in that offense. The number one in that offense hasn't meant anything until this past week where he had like 160 yards receiving. So I just don't know if they're going to replicate that game. And so that's why I'm wondering, if it'll be a little bit closer than maybe what Vegas is giving them here.
We got some breaking news via Lucas. Apparently, the college football playoff is officially set to expand to 12 teams in 2024. So is that next year? Or is that the 2024 season?
2 years. 2 years.
Okay, so 2 seasons from now. They kind of had already like teased that was probably going to happen, didn't they?
Or was I think so. Later? But I mean, technically, it was.
Or was it only going to be 8?
Yeah, I think technically, it was going to be like 2026 was when the original agreement was supposed to go into place or go into effect.
So that's good.
And then, so now I guess they went ahead and said, screw it, let's just go ahead and take care because they're probably sick of hearing it from people. And I get it. Like these teams are, like you said, I mean, there's so much going on with these teams where, some teams are playing, some teams aren't. We already discussed it, but it's just like, just get it to 12. I think that's going to make things so much better. And people are always going to bitch, but I feel like there's so much less to worry about when there's 12.
Yeah. I mean, we'll have to talk about it in another episode, but once it gets there, they need to have like some rules set up of like how teams get in, but a topic for another day. That's for sure. What do you want to, I'm going to talk about who I'm going to watch this weekend here.
Yeah, go
ahead. The USC game, which obviously has big implications for the college football playoff. They're taking on Utah, who is their only loss this season. Granted, they played at Utah. So I'm going to talk, if you look back at that game, Utah's tight end, who I'm going to talk about, Dalton Kincaid, had 16 catches for 234 yards. He leads the Utes in receiving despite missing one game. Michael Mayer will rightfully be the tight end 1 in this draft season, but Kincaid right now is my tight end 2 above Sam Laporta, and I wouldn't be surprised if Kincaid has a more immediate impact in the NFL. He's currently a super senior, and we know that the tight end position can take a couple of years to develop in the NFL. No idea how he'll test athletically, so that's obviously one of the bigger deals for tight end evaluation. So my tight end rankings are really not to be taken seriously at this point. There's always a chance that he's Jalen Weidermeyer and he can't even run or jump. But back to the game this weekend, I think Kincaid was obviously a problem for USC. So I want to see if he can do that again and if he's going to, force Utah to try, or get Utah to beat USC and potentially get them out of the playoff. Sorry. Yeah. I mean, I'm sorry to get into tight end evaluations. I know that's really boring.
Yeah. I mean, I guess, we're getting close enough to where, it's time to start talking about those kind of things because there's definitely going to be tight ends. I don't know. I feel like tight end, so much of it comes down to the combine Whereas with other positions, you might even say the combine doesn't matter. But I feel like, athleticism really does seem to matter for the tight end position. And like you said, I mean, Jalen Weidemeyer was a pretty productive, tight end in college, and then went and ran a 5.0 40 time. It was just like,
He had like a 12-inch vertical. What were you doing?
I have no idea. I ran. I was playing arena football for 2 years, and I hadn't played football in like professional football for I hadn't played team football, I should say, for probably 4 or 5 years. And I was not in my best shape, and I went and ran a 4.78 40 time. And so for him to run a 5.0, or it might have even been over 5, I don't remember, but I know it was right around 5. Oh man, that just blows my mind.
He didn't get drafted. Yeah, and you're absolutely right about the combine being a big deal for tight ends, because nobody knew who Jelani Woods was last year until he just became an athletic freak at the combine. And now, of course, he's putting up stats in the NFL too. He had 8 catches last week. So
yeah,
combine matters for
I don't
tight
know
ends.
I don't know if I believe that he's like a stud or anything, but he had a blow up week. So I mean, you can't take anything away from him. It's like how I feel with JT Sanders. Like I saw the same thing, like a big athletic freak. He was getting hyped in the spring games and stuff. So I'm like, he's getting hyped by his coaches. He's athletic as hell. He's tall. He's big. He's all that kind of stuff. And so that's why I fell in love with him. And it's worked out, for the most part. He's been kind of hit or miss lately, but he's definitely had some big games, and he's probably, at least one of the top 3 tight ends in the class, something like that for next year.
Yeah, I mean, Bowers and him, really. People will probably hang on to Michael Trigg for a while too, but yeah,
I don't know. I know Trigg was getting a lot of hype, but I don't know.
Yeah, he got
I don't know at this point. Yeah, that sucks. So the player I'm going to talk about, or I want to watch this weekend, is a player that I think I've said I was going to watch before, but I want to watch him again, and it's because I feel like I might need to move this player up even more. I've been all over Kendre Miller for the longest time now. I drafted him at the late first, early second, I think it was, in our rookie mock that we did, a month or so ago. And, all I said was, I know a lot of people are saying he's not going to go. He's not going to, go into declare for the NFL draft. Now it seems like everyone believes he's going to declare, and he's coming, and everyone seems to be falling in love with him. Well, I can't be lower than other people at this point on Kendre Miller. And I'm not saying I am. I'm just saying I need to keep that fire lit. So I'm going to go ahead and watch me some Kendre Miller this weekend, because, dude, just blowing up each week. He seems to be getting better each and every week. Obviously the TCU, game has a lot on the line, so it should be a fun game to watch anyway. But I think, on top of that, I just want to see Kendre keep doing what he's doing, and then end up being that top 5 running back that, that I called, a couple months ago, or I was always a big fan of him. I didn't have him in my top 5 at the beginning of the season, but it really did not take long for him to jump up in there.
Yeah, he's been incredible this year. I think I don't know if he kept the touchdown streak alive last week, but he's had a touchdown in every game this season, and he's over 1,000 yards already. So I love Kendre Miller, especially, once Zach Evans transferred out of there. It was his backfield, and he was actually better than Zach Evans last year. So when they're on the same team. So if you're going to draft Zach Evans as your RB3, then why not? Of course you're going to. Kendre Miller RB5 would make perfect sense. You're getting better value.
Exactly.
You're getting way better value there.
Yeah, I guess we just have to wait and see what the NFL is going to think. But the way he's been playing, like you said, consistency each week, touchdowns, yardage, all that kind of stuff. I'm really starting to fall in love with Kendre Miller more and more. I think it has to do with my my co-host on the Devy devotional, Aaron Wilcox. He has him in our C2C league, and he knows how much I love him and how much I talk about him and everything. So every time he does anything, he blows up. And also shout out to Aaron. I told you, I've discussed how great I've been doing all season long in C2C. I dominated the regular season. my team completely fell apart in the playoffs. I mean, just every single player got hurt. Jahmyr Gibbs, Blake Corum. I traded for who's the short guy? I can't think of his name right now.
Deuce Vaughn.
Deuce Vaughn. I traded for Deuce Vaughn, getting 20, 30 points a week. He got me 9 points last week. Just like nothing worked out. So I ended up not doing too well in the playoffs, but Aaron won my league, the league that I was dominating all year. He won that league, and he also won his other C2C league. So he had a great C2C year. But part of that was to do with Kendre Miller. So that's another reason why I love him so much, because he kind of has fallen in love with them because of being on the C2C team and how much I hype him up and all that kind of stuff too.
Yeah, and as long as we're flexing our C2C victories, I will say that I took down Conference 3 in the program, which is a real in-depth recruiting C2C league, and came in second place in the national championship, unfortunately. It's a 48-team league, so 2 out of 48, not bad.
Yeah, hell yeah, that's very good. So it sounds like I've surrounded myself with some very quality co-hosts here, and maybe they need to be looking for a new one themselves. But thank you so much for listening, guys. This was a lot of fun. We did some hits and misses and all that kind of good stuff. We're looking forward to championship week and everything that's going to happen shortly after that, and the chaos that's going to happen if any of these teams lose and Alabama gets into the playoffs, and the chaos that will ensue after that. But thank you so much for listening. Lucas, do we have anything else that we need to talk about before we get out of here?
Nope. I guess I can't say Vols by 50, at least until the bowl game's announced. That's about it. Definitely stay tuned for the content that we're going to be putting out throughout bowl season, and then to get you ready for the 2023 NFL draft. You all have been hearing about the players all season long if you're tuning into the pod. And now we get to dive in even more with draft season coming up. So I'm really excited to see what's coming down the pipe from you all. And man, it's been a lot of fun. I can't believe we're actually all the way through college football season. That's kind of nuts.
It flew right by.
Pretty wild.
Yeah. But hey, it's been an absolute blast, guys. Do you all have any final thoughts, especially on the season? Just overall, if you could describe the season in one word, what word would you use?
I'd say different. Like it seemed like nothing really was quite the same as last year or our expectations as far as like the actual teams themselves, except for maybe Georgia, just dominated the whole time. But I don't think that people ever really thought that Georgia was going to truly dominate. Like they kind of thought that they lucked into a championship last year because, Jameson Williams got hurt, John Mechie got hurt, like all that kind of stuff. And, now they're just the clear-cut favorites to win. So I would say this is just a different year. I mean, look at the teams that are in it. It's not Bama, it's not Ohio State. It's TCU and Michigan and all these other teams.
Yeah, I would say it's weird because it's in some instances it is. I was going to say surprising because you've got Lincoln Riley who's taking USC from wherever they were at to all of a sudden being in the playoff, potentially or probably. But at the same time, it's like not surprising because Georgia is there again, Michigan is there again, and it's kind of. Granted, a lot of people thought Michigan was going to take a step back this year, but they obviously did not. So it's been fun. It's like every college football season. It's just a ton of fun. Fun is my word.
Nice. And one hot take on a coach who will be fired before the end of the year, end of bowl season. I'll give it that.
Ooh, I got one. It's hot. Jimbo Fisher,
Ooh.
Texas A&M. He deserves it than anybody, but the 80, 70 million or whatever they have to pay to fire him, I don't know if they'll fork it up, but they should. And I think if those donors really care about their program, they need to get rid of that guy because they're just purging players right now in the transfer portal.
Yeah, actually, honestly, that was the first one that popped into my head. I'm not big into like actual college football. I don't even know half of these coaches or anything like that. So it's hard for me, but I know, I've heard a lot about Jimbo, and I know that he has not been doing great things at Texas A&M. And it's just been about the money. I don't know if he has the same kind of contract where like if he goes and gets another job that that takes away from the penalties and all that kind of stuff. I don't know how all that works, but he would definitely be the one to get rid of, it seems.
Yeah. Awesome. Hey, it was a lot of fun. Sign us out, guys.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for listening once again. Check out everything that's going on. A full week of content every week at the Full Tilt Dynasty Podcast Network, brought to you by Fantasy Points Media Group and presented by Underdog Fantasy. We will see you guys next week. But for now, we're going to go ahead and cash out.